right, why are we here? Well, we just heard that the customers are changing. There's a huge transformation taking place in the industry. Consumers are expecting to interact with any provider or any company effortlessly, seamlessly. They expect to do that in real time. They expect the companies to be flexible and to engage with them in a dynamic manner. The hotel industry hasn't always been able to do that. But reality is companies that don't enable the flexibility and don't enable the frictionless experiences will just die. And at the same time, when we check in, we still get asked if this is your first stay at a hotel, even if you stayed 20 times. So I was just listening to the theme music earlier, and it sounded like Game of Thrones. And there's obviously big walls in Game of Thrones, the Northern Wall. And I think we're going to talk about how to break down these walls. And to start off with, I want to pose the question to Uli and Jos as well, because Uli and Jos were some of the people that have built the original walls years back in the hotel industry. So I want to talk a little bit about, give you the opportunity to talk about the journey since then and what's changed now.
So I think at the time when we were building Fidelio and Micros and Opera, it was the best thing to do. I mean, PCs were new on the market. There was nothing else. Everybody was afraid of using even PC networks. So I think it was absolutely the right thing to do at the time. Now, as we all know, times have changed. And at some point, the first generation of cloud systems came. And they were essentially doing the same thing, what the old legacy PMSs were doing or are still doing, but in the cloud. That changed to some extent the technology space in the industry, but not really radically. And I think the way and the main reason why we're looking now at open platforms is a completely different one. There's so much innovation going on in the industry from technology companies and startups all over the place, and the hotels and the technology companies are just struggling to get together. And the reason for that is certainly that those legacy PMSs are monolithic big systems which are all closed. So if you have a new app or a new software company coming in a startup mode, and they have some great idea and some great system, and there are many around, they have really big struggle to get to those existing legacy systems, connect, make interfaces. It's all very expensive. It takes a long time. So I think we need to reverse this to create a disruption in the industry, and that can be done by open PMSs and open platforms.
Thank you. Jos, anything to add from your side?
Yeah, a couple things. So I think, to go back to what Uli said, when we built Opera in the, mostly late 90s, early 2000s, the cloud didn't exist. Hotels had their server, and the server was in the basement with a door in front of it, so kind of locked away already. Hard to connect anything to that. I think throughout the years, Micros and other PMSs of the time built many, proprietary integrations, or they received proprietary integrations from door lock vendors, ideas, revenue management systems, CRSs, all of that. So in essence, I think the systems were technically speaking open, but in a controlled manner. But I think also what kind of was very important for hotel PMS vendors at the time is that part of their revenue was driven by the ability to connect to others. And the same applies, I think, for sales and catering CRS systems. Everybody wanted to sell their own system, but they also needed to make money in order to facilitate the cost of integrating with third parties. Because at the time, you had to go to the hotel to assist the hotel with connecting two things to each other. Today, that's not required anymore. So when I started Stay in Touch in 2013, I was very focused on ensuring that we would sell based on features that the PMS would have, not on what it would integrate to. So the way we are looking at it now, and I think all of my colleagues here on the table would agree with that, is that the integration is part of the application. It's not something we charge for. It comes with it. We basically sell or try to sell our advantages over each other by focusing on features and functionality and service, not on integration. So I think openness is two ways. It's much more open today because it's in the cloud and it's easy to find each other. You don't have to go to the basement of a hotel. But also the commercial closeness that there was kind of has disappeared. So it's no longer close to arrival, which is probably a very similar firm to you guys. It's basically open to anyone that wants to connect to it, assuming there is a good relation between all of that. Because even with APIs, a relation between vendors and partners is still a requirement, I think, to make it successful.
Right. Richard, why, we heard about APIs. Some people might not be familiar with that. There are some companies that are pretend open, and then there are others that are real open. What's the difference in your mind?
I think the main difference is, I think the original platforms, they have those kind of application protocol interfaces, the APIs that you can actually kind of connect to.
So that's how data kind of travels back and forth,
Yeah,
right?
the synapses basically that make things happen. I think the difference is, and it was for us basically, that we just thought that this is a completely new age. This is mobile is not some kind of feature. The whole idea of an online space and an offline space, the two things for us are completely together. And so for us, when we think about open platforms, I think we were one of the first, or maybe the first PMS to fully publish our API, let it be open for absolutely anyone. And I think that's the definition of being open, that you invite any developer, and it doesn't have to be a hotel company. I think that's why we try and innovate to partners outside of our industry, bring in parties outside of what hotel tech companies are actually doing, because I think that's the point, is that open platforms of tomorrow or of today in our example, I think it's all about bringing the innovation and bringing that kind of possibility to the product managers of tomorrow, and that's basically how we see the hoteliers, thinking up what's the best way to actually service my guest, and not being tied down by the technology vendor into, this is the way to do things, this is the way to actually deliver that experience. I think that's a slightly kind of different mindset.
Okay, Jan, from your perspective, you've been around since 2002?
Yeah, 16 years.
16 years?
I built the PMS on dial-up connections. So I don't necessarily agree that we're doing the same things as Fidelio did, because technically, native cloud-based PMSs are just built differently. Integrations must be built within them from day one. They must be built, cloud-based PMSs, with the goal of being able to provide their PMSs to third parties. I think distribution is a good example. PMSs that were built 10, 15, 20 years ago still have difficulties now to integrate channel managers. But cloud-based PMSs like ours, from day one, they knew they needed to do distribution in real time. So distribution is pretty obvious, but now we see APIs coming up, for different purposes as well, revenue management systems, upselling platforms. But this ability is just built within the PMS from day one as you're building the PMS.
So how is this going to help me as a hotel kind of be more effortless or interact more effortless with my customers? Why should I care? And is this really different, or is it just lipsticks on an ugly pig? Uli?
No, I do think it's actually very different. I think I would tend to think actually more radical than this. We are all using our iPhones every day, and this is an open platform. So we use apps, we download apps. If we don't like the app anymore, we delete it and use the next app. Whatever, it's very easy and straightforward. So my vision and our vision of how we see the open PMS and open platform is really to have the hoteliers put their own tech stack together all the time. One of the reasons why it's so hard for hoteliers today to use new apps and innovative apps is actually it's always a project they have to go through. They have to go through a project of implementing a system, of getting the interface done, asking for licenses, all that kind of good old stuff we know. Now, the idea behind the open platform is actually that a hotelier should be able to put their own tech stack together and use any app they want. If there is a new CRM app coming out, they should be able to test this app. If they don't like it, they use the next app. And I think the idea about open PMS and open platform is really a different one. It should not be only in regards to integrations and apps. It should also be very much in terms of how you can implement and activate a PMS even today. Going through a huge project of several weeks or even months and spend a lot of time and money up front, that should be a thing of the past today.
So is it like swipe your credit card, download an app? Activate.
I think we are not yet there 100%, but there are approaches on how that can be done in a very good manner today.
Okay.
There's also, I think in this industry, there's a lot of legacy systems outside of the PMS that are in hotels that are not just going to disappear. And also when hotel buyers look to buy a new PMS, they're going to think do I have to replace everything, or can I just put one thing in? And I think one thing that's important to understand with all the legacy out there today is that not all of that legacy has the API protocols ready, and there are multiple new platforms that are trying to be the answer to that. But as long as some of these larger legacy systems, don't have the same thought process that we here have, it's going to be difficult, and we'll have to have some standard protocols in place to allow connections to, for example, TravelClick or Delphi or some of these other ones that just kind of, I wouldn't say refuse, but are not very open to use the APIs that the PMS has available to enable what Uli says, because I think that's the key. We need to get to, it shouldn't matter what CRM the hotel uses, it shouldn't matter what upsell tool the hotel uses, it should just work. And now, work is always thinking it through. It's not like, plug and play and it goes, because it's not a consumer app where only 3 data fields are connected. It's usually many more things. So there has to be some thought put into the whole thing in order to make an integration, even if it's open, successful. But once you have the end goal in mind and you can think it through, and PMSs of today, I think all 4 of us have these standard APIs available that provide reservation, guest, availability data, which is kind of the key of pretty much every transaction. There's a lot of opportunities that can be explored.
So do we see the emergence of kind of a hotel operating system down the road, kind of an iOS of the hotel industry, Jan?
Can I just say,
Yeah.
I think this was a good point, but the problem we're facing now is that each PMS has a different set of APIs.
Yep.
They just develop a different thing, So for a lot of third parties, again, whatever upselling systems, they must connect to each PMS independently using, their open API, but each one is a bit different.
Yep.
So at some point, I think people like us should get together. PMSs should help standardize APIs and allow this, allow third parties to be able to connect to PMSs more easily because they don't need to connect to each independently.
Who drives that standardization?
Well, nobody so far.
No, but I think for me, there's a great, I'm going to do a shout out to a great startup. It's called Impala. And I think, these types of new startups, I think this is the thing that we as vendors need to enable is that, unlimited creativity. And I think that's...
What does Impala do quickly?
So Impala is a great platform that, to me, basically is trying to do the HTNG of these types of hotel connections.
So they're middleman,
what everyone thinks of as the service bus, which is like my most hated thing. But anyway, it's an actual app, and I think those guys are doing a great thing. And I think it's up to us to either sit in a room, basically try and figure out what is that fundamental data layer, or basically work with these kinds of apps. But I think for us, when we thought about the PMS and we thought about what it is that a PMS of tomorrow looks like, a little bit more like that kind of operating system, I think for us, we don't think of it as basically putting lipstick on a pig. It's genetically modify that pig to actually come out with luscious lips. That kind of thing is it should be a hypercharged pig. And I think that's the thing that will drive this industry forward. So I think when we thought about what is the fundamental thing that the hotels are actually selling? Is it rooms, or is it parts of experience? And I think those are the types of questions that we as hoteliers really, really need to rethink. Is the way that we've done it, the way that it will work tomorrow? And we need to start embracing some of these kind of bigger ideas. For example, we at Mews think about, if Netflix starts doing travel experiences, not just online experiences, what does that look like? And I think that's the kinds of things that we should be thinking about. And I think it's going to be much better for the hotel industry to kind of embrace those kinds of big ideas, and to embrace, what is it that my property or what my brand or my universe, what does that actually kind of represent to
And
the
we're not just talking about PMS, right? We're talking about the entire stack, right?
It's the entire thing.
Uli, I see you want to say something.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that really drives us is when I look at our children, the next generation of travelers, that will also, by the way, be the business travelers very soon. Jos and I talked about our children because we know each other from the past, and my son is 21, he's studying. He and his friends will never go to the traditional hotels we are used to go. Even though they could do it. They have the funds, they have the money, they are traveling all over the world. But what are they doing? They are selecting their properties by other criteria than we would. They look at technology. If a hotel cannot be booked online, where they can check on online, where they can check in online, where they can pay online, where they can walk out without standing in a queue, they would not select those hotels. So I think that will drive the disruption, because the hoteliers, we all will realize pretty soon that the next generation of travelers, a lot of them will look at different things when they select and pick a hotel. And technology will be a key driver for that disruption, definitely.
Well, it's really driving the engagement with the brand, right? Or
Absolutely.
with the company, and how do you create that frictionless experience we talked about this morning, right?
Yeah, loyalty
I think
and how loyalty
Uli's
programs will be looked at will be totally different.
Hopefully.
I think to Uli's point, that behavior of guests, I think, is that's where we as hoteliers or hotelier vendors and you as hoteliers should really focus our efforts. And the platform is secondary to that. Of course, that's an enabler, but it's kind of secondary. You first want to decide, how do I want to run my business? How do I want to enable? Yeah. We, in our case, for example, Stay in Touch, we offer self-service, but we have a lot of hotels that are struggling with actually implementing it because they think, I buy it and it's just going to work. Yeah. Well, that's not the case. It does work, but you still need to tell your guests to go there, use it. You need to make it centric to the way it operates in your check-in or check-out experience or on-site experience. Yeah. If I take, for example, Citizen M as an example, which is not one of our customers, so I can be open and biased about that. I always, when I come to London, I stay at Citizen M because I think it's one of the best hotel experiences provided today, at least the way I like them. And this is the way I like it means not everybody likes it that way, but a lot of people like it like that. And you get in there, it's very frictionless. I checked in on Saturday when I was at home. I paid on Saturday, I was at home, all on my phone. I got a QR code. I get to the hotel. I basically scan my phone and I can make my own key and I go to my room. All set and done. Perfect.
Without talking to anyone.
Didn't talk to anybody.
Anyone, right?
Well, that's a good point you bring it up. There's always somebody roaming around there that's kind of the host that greeted me and asked if I needed anything else. That's all I needed and that's fine. To me, that's a very personal experience. That's the way I like it. That's the way I think Uli's and my kids like it, and probably a lot of people like it these days. That important part of touching people that way and using technology to change operational procedures in the hotel, which is key to make technology a success, I think, is pretty important, I think, to think about. And when we sell PMS, we sell what we call choice of service because we realize that there's still a lot of hotels with a big front desk like they have here. Because there are still people that want to go to a front desk, don't want to do it themselves. Yeah. But I think you need to build a hotel and you need to acquire a platform or an application that can provide you as a hotelier all the services you need to provide for your different type of guests.
It strikes me, though, we have talked about platforms for the last 15 years or so, right? Yeah. Or 10 years. And what's different now? What's changed now that we see this traction and this transformation? Maybe Jan and Richard, kind of, you've been...
Yeah, well, again, what's changed is that there's a lot of options now. As you can build, as a hotelier, as you can build your hotel tech stack. Cloud-based PMSs have become powerful. They can replace the legacy systems, which wasn't the case 10 years ago sometimes. So there's the option. There are options for hoteliers to choose their own native cloud-based platform. And that decision is always a long-term decision. You don't want to change your PMS every year. Well, most of you don't, I think. So usually the life cycle is somewhere in between 5 and 10 years. Mm-hmm. So to make a good decision now, to pick a new platform, a PMS, hoteliers should really look for open APIs for the ability to be able to choose their hotel techs next year, because you never know what's going to come next year. So I think what's changed is the openness.
Your technology,
yes,
right?
Yes, and
right.
to make sure you work with partners who are going to stay, that the PMS company is going to stay here for the next 5 years, and it will evolve. So,
yeah, I think for me, like the main thing that we have to think of as hoteliers, I think we have to be brave. I think we have to be brave to actually put out a product that
would be something new.
That I think is, as a hotel, like I think it's not just about the check-in experience. It doesn't matter, if you have a reception desk or you don't have a reception desk. I think the platforms of tomorrow, the platforms of today, have to think about where do I fit in to this entire experience of a journey? Is it a business trip? How can I, as a hotelier, be fundamental to that? And it's very much about helping humans at the end of the day. Like, we as technology vendors and as technology partners, we can do so much, but I think the key for us is to actually enable a huge amount more experiences, and experiences that are outside the hotel's environs, that are outside the reception desk, and that we can plug into the wider world. And I think that's why, we can be all disparaging about things like HTNG. And the reason why, for example, within Mews we are, is just because of the fact that we find it so insular, that it's just, we're looking at our industry as just one thing. And I think what we need to find is basically a way to communicate with the wider world, to make us as hoteliers part of that user experience or customer journey when they're actually traveling, when they're trying to get something from us, and to actually then participate in creating some of these new experiences as well. And I think that's the really exciting thing about what you can do as a platform, and how you can fit into that.
You would assume that customers, we want the Netflix and the Amazon and the Google experience, right? And if we don't get that when we're staying somewhere, what will happen to the hotel industry if we don't move down this path of platformization and appification, as I call it? What happens to all of us if we don't embrace it? Yeah. Anyone?
Then the same thing that happened to blockbusters will happen.
Yeah.
Netflix will win and blockbusters will disappear.
Yeah. Right.
That has happened.
Right.
Same thing will happen in hotels. If you don't adapt, then eventually you'll become obsolete. You'll disappear. Yeah. That's basically.
Well, so the Citizen M's of this world, coming back to your example, is kind of the way forward in your
I totally disagree with Citizen M.
Okay,
They're not clients of ours, and probably after this they never will be. But I hate the idea of standardization. Yeah, it's just it's basically what the OTAs fundamentally want. They want to see you as commodities. Yeah, and it's just fine. You can adopt some sort of thinking about yourself as commodities in the way that the rooms are, or some of the basic services. But as a hotelier, I like the idea that we're unique. The service that we provide is unique. So I don't want to see standardized rooms, one by one. That's why Airbnb is such an attractive drag for the younger generation. It's the fact that they managed to kind of say, look, here are 10,000 rooms, the same as what Marriott has, or 60,000, 600,000 rooms, or whatever the actual count might be. But these are all different types of experiences that you can have. And I think it's up to us. So even if you have a type of room that's standardized, make it more interesting, make it more exciting, make it a draw for the customer. To just not think that he's just buying a commodity, which is a room. Right. I think that's going completely against, and it's not just about the way that you check in.
I think Uli wants to say something.
Those are gimmicks.
He's waiting to.
But Richard brings up an interesting point. Right. He doesn't like the idea of those cookie-cutter hotel rooms, and I think that goes back to the choice of service. You like it, I don't like it. Mm-hmm. But I think the generation that goes more and more out there and travels more and more is also not interested in going to Marriott, maybe like Richard. They want an experience that's good and different, or unique to them if it's there.
Yeah, and you can have when you look at it, Citizen M, the founder is an old friend of mine, and I think you have to make a differentiation here between what the hardware is, and I tend to agree with you there, Richard, and what the software is. And the software for me is part of the services as well. When you look at the service, when you come into a Citizen M lobby and do your check-in, or when you walk into the lobby and talk to people, and so it's the most personalized service you can imagine, despite the fact that the guests actually check in themselves via a kiosk or things like that. But you always have an ambassador there who really takes care of the customers that are in the lobby, regardless of what they are doing. When I walk to a hotel reception today to make a check-in, actually what will I find when I finally make it through the queue? I'll find a receptionist that looks mainly into his screen and interacts with you, just asking you, where's your credit card? here's the key, and that's really it. He never really talks to you, and that's the main difference at Citizen M. The people use the technology where it's good to be used, but actually for the services and how the ambassadors communicate with the guests, it's much superior than in many hotels, or in most of the hotels today.
Okay.
Well, let me just say, because from my point of view, from a PMS company point of view, I think we should just allow hoteliers to choose their tech stack and provide them with the open API. So there are different hotels. There will always be different types of hotels. 50% of independent hotels still don't have a PMS at all. I'm talking to our customers in Scotland or Dubai or Thailand. They are attracting different types of guests. So again, from my PMS company point of view, I just think we need to allow hoteliers choose their tech stacks, choose their applications carefully, maybe bring a wide choice, but allow them to decide what they want to bring to their guests.
Mm-hmm. So I want to talk quickly about the big guys that we mentioned before and some others that are all heavily investing in the platforms, but then I want to talk about how that all applies to revenue management, because most of the audience here is from that background. So Amadeus, Oracle, Shiji, who bought Stay in Touch a few months back, they're all investing very heavily in platforms. We've seen some of the big brands rolling out or announcing platforms and more or less open technology stacks. How do you effectively differentiate yourselves, compete, get bought? And what are some of the big transformational shifts as these guys roll out their platforms? What we will see will become different or is going to be different in the next 18 months, 2 years? Who wants to start?
The thing that I love about the act of being a hotelier is that fundamentally we always think of it as we're in the most human industry. And that's why we don't want to have these receptionists as shopkeepers. We want to have that kind of, you coming up, facilitating real human interactions. And I think when you look at those big guys, most of what you hear is this kind of standardization. It's a lot about, offering these types of services, this kind of personalization that I don't think of as personalization at all. It's basically a kind of race to the bottom. Mm-hmm. It's basically this idea that you have these coercive platforms that are advertising things to you, that are pushing you in one way. For me, what hoteliers do, and the best out of any industry in the world, is offering things that you don't know that you need, things that you didn't expect that you actually wanted. The best concierges of the world always offer that thing that you didn't say that you wanted. And I feel that that's where we as an industry, that's why I feel so comfortable about where we are as Mews, and what we're trying to kind of enable is this, great flourishing of any type of experience. And I think that's the thing that maybe makes our platform stand out, is the idea of, this heterogeneous world that we're trying to create as experience givers, and really kind of come back to the heart of hospitality in itself.
Yeah, anyone else wants to expand?
Sure. I think when you look at those big companies, not only in hotel industry, but all tech companies worldwide, there are many examples also from the presentation this morning. It's very hard for them to be innovative. I think the innovation will always take place somewhere else. And when you look at Oracle, for example, or some of these legacy companies, what they do is they actually try to sell to a hotel or a hotel group everything out of one hand. So somebody who uses the Oracle PMS has also, Opera has also to use all the other components from Opera, and they always try to push those and restrict other new companies to come on board and show what they are doing innovative for hotels. So I think the opportunity we have as a new companies is to say we focus on what we really do good. And we want to focus on what PMS, a core PMS, has to do. That is really the best thing we can focus on. And everything else is actually, there are so many innovative things out in the market that can cover those areas. And our task is to allow those innovative apps to come on board, and for the hotelier to pick the app which serves best the guest journey and the operations of their property. And I think the enabler in that will be the openness and how they can connect to those those platforms. So I think the industry is going away again from this all out of one hands into where is the best in breed in the apps and the third-party software systems that are there. So I think I would always promote the core PMS has to do everything there very, very good, and the rest is really being done by third-party apps or third-party applications. Because one of the main reasons why that will become important to hoteliers is also when you look at the employees. Today, it's very hard for people to find staff today already and to train them on Opera and all of the legacy systems. So I think when the time moves on, it will be even tougher to get people to work in hotels and find the right people. So actually the use of the PMS should be much easier and self-learning and lean than ever before.
So we're talking about staff engagement and customer engagement.
I think it's both at the same time.
And how does that apply, because you used to work for a revenue management company before, how does that apply for revenue management, all that stuff that we're talking about?
Thank you, Klaus.
You forgot all.
I think that's worth a longer discussion on revenue management. But I think what we see is we obviously have some of the predominant players out there that have very good systems that are known in the market. At the same time, in parallel, we see some new kids on the blocks. And what they do is actually they have systems out there which are also much easier to use, to implement, to activate. We had one revenue management system, which I even think they are here. They did an integration two-way to our PMS over a weekend, just to show it on World Travel Market. Two-way integration, full in all ways. So that is what I think needs to come also to revenue management: easier implementation, easier use, easier integrations, and make it more transparent than it was in the past. So I think for the chains, that's good, what the current systems do, because they have the revenue directors and revenue managers. But for independents and smaller groups, it has to become much easier and straighter, the revenue.
But as data is in one place, I guess, consolidated,
Absolutely.
aggregated, sitting in a platform, it'll be much easier for us to target and put the right price in front of the right person, right?
I think
Absolutely.
the hotelier has much more choice now.
Sorry, what? Yeah?
The hotelier has much more choice now than a few years ago because of the cloud and the open integrations that are now taking place. To Uli's point, years ago it was an act of God to connect revenue management to a PMS. Now it can be done fairly quick, and I think that's also why there are now a few newer RMSs out there that are trying to make a dent into what's going on out there. And Klaus, you mentioned within Ideas, you guys also had I'm not sure if it's a wake-up call, but you also revised a lot of things within Ideas to maintain relevancy and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I think that's a lot of that is because of connectivity, which all of you can benefit from. It's a lot easier now to say, okay, I'm going to try this year Pace and next year Ideas, and based on that I'm going to decide. It's not that easy, but it's possible to do that, whereas years ago that would be basically, I'm going to buy revenue management system A, and that's it, I'm going to use for the next 10 years. That has disappeared. So you have, because of the openness and because of the platforms and because of everything in the cloud, it's much easier to switch. Even the PMS is much easier than it used to be.
Yeah. Just like we used to from the iPhone, right?
Yeah.
So just very quickly, I want to ask a wrap-up question.
I had for me, I think revenue management is by far the most difficult part of this. And I think that, for when we're kind of thinking about it, it's all the different attributes that somebody's seeing within your room. That's basically what needs to be priced up. I think, for example, when I first met Jens from Pace, our main kind of discussion was, whether the future of pricing is personalized pricing, or whether it's basically seeing the right price at the right time that you're actually trying to buy. And I think that those different things, is it pricing at the moment when you have that customer, or is it basically presenting something that he's willing to pay for, or presenting then a greater story through an upsell, through that kind of journey? Is that the way to actually kind of structure your pricing? So I don't think, again, there's a one-size-fits-all. But I think what we as platforms should enable is, the ability to structure it in whichever way you want.
Right. Okay. How will the technology, the hospitality technology landscape look in 5 years? If you can give me a quick, elevator speech, 10 seconds or 15 seconds. I'll start with Jan maybe, and then we'll move our way through.
I think a lot of new cloud-based PMSs will make it to global level. I think there will be a few new players as well. Some will make it to the global level, some will stay local. I think the legacy systems will be defending, maybe through acquisitions as well, but definitely defending. But we should see definitely more startups, hospitality tech companies providing different apps. And we as cloud-based PMSs should support that by offering open APIs.
More choice.
And more choice.
Right?
It's basically more choice.
Yeah, Uli?
I'm convinced that over the coming 5 to 10 years, there will be happening a real disruption in the industry in terms of technology. We have seen this in many verticals where actually people at some point decided now it's the moment to go away from legacy big monolithic systems and really switch to the cloud and apply SaaS systems in the real sense, which today in the hotel industry is still not the case. We are below 5% of real cloud systems worldwide that are being in use. And I think that disruption will be led by independents, but also by some chains that are really going to apply real cloud technology and open API platforms.
Great, thank you. Richard?
So I think what we'll see probably in 5 years' time is that there'll be a greater choice. I think there'll be a lot of different modes in which you can kind of operate, and I think you'll be able to actually choose the right. The fundamental relationship will change. You will ask your vendor for the things that you want to enable, not what the vendor can enable. These are the connections that you have. I think we've tried to do that, for example, with an integration to Zapier, bringing in the wider world of technology into the hotel space. And I think those are the kinds of things that we'll see in 5 years' time, and we'll continue building that, and I'm sure all of the other guys sitting next to me will continue doing that. So I think it should be a really, really exciting time for all of us to be brave.
Great, thanks. And Jos?
I think that in 5 years from now that a lot of the data or a lot of transactions that are being entered by staff members in the PMS will be done by guests. In other words, I think that self-service will start growing, and self-service not in the bad sense of it, but in a good sense of personalized self-service, as you see in many hotels that adapted correctly by putting, removing the front desk and putting a place in the lobby where there is a host or somebody nice that helps you through the process of checking in and out. So really self-service is I think, a big trend, important to enable these platforms.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks to panelists. Catch them at lunch.